And maybe this is really an issue for men in particular, in terms of how we define ourselves. And how I define myself in part is my ability to earn a certain income, my position, my title. And because I wasn't where I think I should have been,
Mhm.
I was not willing to be vulnerable in that area.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle, the Breathe Easy Coach, and we're continuing with our interview with Dwain-Welcome, and we're going into part two. Dwain, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your story with us. And I want to just invite you if you want to say anything to the people as they are listening to you today.
Oh, no, thank you. I am grateful for the opportunity to share. I'm hoping that it is helpful to others in whatever their situation. I'm surely it's in many ways, even as we're having this conversation, it allows me to go back and revisit because I think as we deal with integrity, it is something, it's a journey, it's a lifelong journey. So it's not like you get to a point, or I haven't gotten to a point where I'm the final version of it. It is surely an opportunity to look at these things and to look at myself and to continue to grow in integrity. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and to share.
Thank you so much. Okay. So, question number two. When your spouse found out the truth, what was her reaction? And how did it impact your relationship, your self image, and your sense of integrity? And I know that's a loaded question, so feel free to break it down in sections or segments. And so the first one was, what was her reaction when she found out the truth? And you can give us the context of how she found out the truth.
Well, I know that you were angry. You were very angry. And what I sensed, you were in terms of we were getting ready to get married, we were engaged. And when you found this out, you were angry and you wanted to end it. Guess my biggest fear of not coming forward was that you would end the relationship. I could see the disappointment, I can see the hurt as well. And when I had to come forward and share that I'd been lying about my income and so on, that's when the full weight of what I had done kind of came down on me. That's when all the rationalization left because then I begin to see that it is not just about the income. It's not just the thing that I lied about. It was the how much trust that was placed in my word. And because there was so much trust placed in my word, you made so much of your life available and open to me. So now you trusted me with yourself. You trusted me with your family. You trusted me with your resources. You trusted me with being in your presence. So there was a lot more on the line that was at stake with that lie than just about my income. I also realized that it robbed myself also because I remember thinking when all of this came to the truth, it was like I realized how silly it was, you know, that so what if I wasn't making what I think I should be making?
Mm.
Okay, it was honest work. And then I think, okay, what would have happened if I just told the truth at the beginning?
Mm.
All the pain that I caused, all the to you and all the pain and the shame and the guilt and that I was causing myself, the lack of sleep. When I started to weigh what I lied about against the impact, I realized how minimal this is and how maximum the impact was and how much I was I could have lost because of this little lie that, and when I say little lie, I put that in quotes just in terms of what it is that I was lying about.
Mhm.
So in addition to the shame and the guilt that I was feeling, I was angry at myself because in that moment I realized it didn't make sense. So that was a part of the struggle. Part of me was angry at myself. Why did I do this? Why did I allow it to go so far? Why didn't I take the many opportunities to sit down and say, hey, you know, this is the situation. Okay. And how much quicker it would have relieved me of all the agony that I was going through. And then also how it would have given you an opportunity to know me a little better and to be able to help in ways that I clearly wasn't needed help. So I robbed you of choice and I robbed me of support and help
Yeah.
and encouragement and information and knowledge and resources and all those things that you count on need from a partner. I deprived myself of that just because I felt like I did not meet your expectations of me, which was all in my head. You had never said that to me. You had never listed, give me a checklist and said, okay, you got to hit this checklist in terms of income. None of that was because you said that to me. All of this came from my own false sense of what I was supposed to be and how much I was supposed to make. And as a result, being unwilling to be vulnerable. And as I'm sharing this with you, I realize that it's that, and maybe this is really an issue for men in particular, in terms of how we define ourselves. And how I define myself in part is my ability to earn a certain income, my position, my title. And because I wasn't where I think I should have been, I was not willing to be vulnerable in that area. And the lies were designed to cover up that sense of lack of accomplishment and how that made me feel about myself because I was not where I thought that I should be or where I thought others expected me to be. So the response was to cover it up with lies and deception, with the hope that it'll buy me some time to get to where I can say, ta-da, here's who I am, and I'm hitting this list. And there's a possibility that I could have done that and you still wouldn't have been impressed because that truthfully was not what you expected of me.
Yeah.
And you surely didn't express that to me. So I was shooting for a goal that was an illusion in many ways because it ultimately doesn't define who I am. So I do remember the hurt and the pain. And I remember for myself the shame, the guilt, the anger at myself. And then also seeing the magnitude of the impact, not being truthful to myself, not being truthful to you. It has impacts, unlike what the rationale tells you that it's my problem. It has impact because there are people that are relying on my word, people that I profess to love, that are trusting my word because it is coming from me and they accept and they assume that I'm speaking the truth. And in effect,
Yeah.
you are involved with somebody that you don't know because that is not, I am not who I am representing to you. So the magnitude of that kind of dropped on me. But also the other part of it is that there was an element of relief, right? Where it's like, okay, so it's out there. And I remember one of the exercises I did was to actually write out all the lies as I can remember them, and then what the truth is. And even as I went through that exercise, it showed me one, the depth that I went in covering up. But it also showed me as I was going through that process, with each expression, I went through two things. One, when I had to say it, or when I had to write it, it was like, oh, that's terrible. But then it also said, okay, now it is out. There's no need to lie about that anymore. Okay. So the illustration is, it was like doing a turnaround and going back to where I got lost on the highway and
Yeah.
going right back to that point
Mhm.
of division. It's like, okay, so I'm going back to where I left. And so, yes, it had all those impacts, the impacts of the shame and the guilt and recognizing that I had really messed up and I'd caused a lot of hurt and pain. But it also allowed me to then go back and be vulnerable. And then I'm thinking, okay, if I had done this at the very beginning, it would have saved me all the pain and the shame and the guilt that I felt. And it would have set me on a path that I really wanted to be. And I would have been one person and not these two people trying to exist in one body and one mind. So yes, as I think back on that, there was that duality going on in my being, the shame, the guilt, and then also the relief that now it is out. And if you remember it, even as I wrote it all out, I couldn't remember, but I had to go through that process as certain things would come up.
Mhm.
I had to be very intentional. So even if it wasn't in that letter that I'd written in one moment, something else would come up. And then I had to go through that exercise of coming to you and saying, okay, and I remember this happened and I said this to you. The truth is this. And I remember how excruciating that was because it seemed to me that I was taking you through once again with every new revelation, the pain and the guilt and the anger and the hurt that you were feeling. And I also was going through almost like a reshaping or a reframing of my own mind because now I have to intentionally, without prompting, come to
Mhm.
you and say, well, Michelle, I said this to you and it wasn't true. And
Mhm.
this is the truth. And then I went through that process also of the shame and the guilt and the recognition that this was not something to lie about. So with each incident, I had to go through that practice.
Mhm.
And I think over time, it became a little easier, but it was a real struggle over an extended period of time. And it is something that it's part of that process that I've kept in that I'm a little bit more deliberate in what I say because I want to make sure that it is truthful to the best of my understanding that it is. And if I am prompted that, oh, it is not,
Mhm.
to go back without prompting and say, oh, by the way, such and such is the case. And once as I continued to go through that practice, I think there was less shame and less guilt. I still am very mindful and conscious because I love you that I don't want to hurt you. There's that part of me that doesn't want to hurt you. But it's coming to that place of understanding that as painful as the truth is, there's healing there as opposed to the pain that comes with lying and the deceiving. So yes, it's that cycle continued. As a revelation came to me, having to come and say, hey, I know I said A, but B is the case, and going through that process again of shame and guilt and fear. Okay, is this going to be the next one that I'm going to say that she's going to be like, oh, that is it, and she's going to leave? And and that speaks to something else as well, which, if you don't mind, I'll share. That fear of you leaving, you know, um, was so was greater than in my head than the truth. So therefore, I rationalized that okay, if I shielded you from the pain of telling you this thing, that I'm in effect, I'm doing you a favor. In other words, I'm protecting, I'm protecting you from hurt. So therefore, maybe I should keep this from you. But those who you love, you tell the truth. So it's not an expression of love to lie and to be deceptive. So, and one of the things that you'd always said, even in the midst of that, and it was part convicting, but it was almost like a door out, is that we can deal with anything once you tell me the truth. I had to trust that in you to overcome the fear of you leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to what I shared earlier about the vulnerability. To trust someone, to trust you with that requires me to be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and vulnerability means risk.
Yeah.
And I had to risk. I had to come to a place where being truthful was more important than you even leaving. So there was a growth area for me, how those things work together, being vulnerable, speaking the truth, and not worry about the consequence of it. And then also trusting that you are going to stay, because in spite of it, at least now you have choice. You have the choice of staying or going. And then you stay because you've chosen to stay and all the information is out there. So again, I guess one of the lessons is that you can't operate with integrity without vulnerability. And you can't, and integrity requires being truthful regardless of what the perceived consequence would be. The truth has to be paramount. So I hope I touched all the questions that
Well, well, no,
which one did I
but
miss?
most of them absolutely that you did. And I like the fact that you brought up that the choice was taken away. I couldn't choose. With the lies, when we lie to somebody, we take away their ability to choose. It's also manipulating them to do what it is that we want them to do without them having the full facts, all the information. Okay. But it also rips up the foundation. There is no healthy foundation upon which you can build a relationship or a life if there are lies in there, because the lies are cracks in your foundation. And if you think of a building, when an architect is doing it, if the foundation is not set, the whole building is going to collapse. Okay. And so the lies, the deceptions, the manipulations, and all that other stuff sets up a very faulty foundation. So even if you might struggle and get through 5 years, in the 6 years, things might start to crumble. Okay, because it was in the foundation. And so you always want to set up a healthy foundation for the relationship. Okay. And getting to that place that you said was your growth edge, the truth had to be paramount, more important than whether or not the person is leaving. Because by lying to them, they definitely going to leave, because at some point they're going to find out the truth. Because how can you keep track of all the lies in every situation? You can't. You can't keep track of the lies. And at some point, the person's going to be able to pick it up. They're going to know, and they're going to call you on it. Then what you're going to do? And the other individual is going to be able to sense when they're being lied to. And now that don't make no sense. And they might get very tenacious about it. It's like, hey, and
Yeah.
no, something's not right here. No, you said this before. And so they're going to keep going at it because something is not making sense to them, because they remember clearly and they believed what you were saying. And absolutely, that if you love somebody, you owe them the truth. That's an obligation. That's a duty. You
Yeah.
owe them the truth because without truth, you can't talk about your love.
Yeah.
You can't because you're not respecting them as a human being, as an individual. You lying to me because you love me? Now that's not adding up.
Yeah.
That's not adding up. And so it's required that you have to tell them the truth. And it has to be, you know, that you value the truth. Okay. And if that's who you want to be, then it dictates. Integrity dictates. Truth dictates
Yeah.
certain actions. And if the actions are not in alignment, then truth is not one of your highest values. Integrity is not one of your highest values. Honesty is not one of your highest values. So there's a discrepancy between who you believe you are and who you're actually projecting to the world. There's a discrepancy. What I loved about what you when you were sharing is that you brought up a part of me this, a part of me that, and you know how much I love parts, internal family systems. I love when we talk in parts because a lot of times those parts are holding parts of our story. And they have woundings, they have fears, they have interests, they have purpose, they have desires. But all of them are trying to protect us. They're looking out to try and help us, even though when we actually assess it, it might not seem be so helpful, but they have a good intention behind it. And as we get to understand those different parts of ourselves, we're able to actually get the story and then maybe even relieve some of the burdens that they were carrying. And so I really appreciated you utilizing that kind of language because a lot of times we do have conflicting parts inside of us that are doing things for different reasons. The shame part, the guilt part, the lying part, the fearful part. These are all parts of us that are carrying a bunch of energy
Yeah.
along with that. Those activities that they're doing, they have energy, but then why did they come up? And so that's the other part of the growth spectrum, understanding the whys behind it, understanding their particular stories and what that traces back to. Because a lot of times it's not what's happening right now, it's something that happened before in the past that we learned those lessons. And then we're like, okay, in order to survive, in order to avoid a certain outcome, this is what needs to be done. But there are consequences. Absolutely, there are consequences when we have integrity breaches. And you're right. I did say, we can get through anything
Mhm.
as long as you tell me the truth. And that's something that we also raise our kids with. That truth. Truth has to be paramount.
Yeah.
Truth has to be paramount because that's the foundation. I like the fact that you highlighted that you are robbing me of the chance of getting to know you. Because it's true. When we lie, when we choose to lie, we are putting on a mask. We're pretending. So the individuals don't get to really know us, our real selves. And if you want to have a deep relationship with somebody, you have to be able to be yourself. You have to be able to be yourself. It's like a woman who marries a man, right? And that every day before he gets up in the morning, she's putting on her full thing of makeup, so he never gets to see her. So he doesn't really know what she looks like. He knows the finished product, but he doesn't know her in the raw. He doesn't know her in the raw. And she doesn't know whether or not he would love her in the raw if he really saw her without all the makeup, without all of the embellishments and all that stuff. And the truth is, if you have a relationship, you want to be able to be your real self, your true self with the individual, because then you know that they're going to stick with you no matter what. They're in it for the long haul.
Mhm.
And that requires truthfulness and transparency, as well as vulnerability and authenticity. Those things are needed to be able to have a healthy, harmonious relationship. Doesn't mean that you won't have your up and down. Of course, you'll have those, but you can bounce back. It builds in some resilience in the relationship if you have those things present. I think you did hit on the fact about your self-image and your sense of integrity. It started calling you out to something else that you needed to start being truthful, and you had a process. And that's what we want to be able to outline for the men that are listening, that there's a process to get to integrity, to awaken your integrity. And that's what the Integrity Awakenings framework is about. There's a way to actually get through this process where you can establish yourself firmly as a new man of integrity. Okay. And it's being deliberate, it's being intentional, it's doing those reps. In order to rewire our brain, we have to do like 30,000 reps of an action to actually rewire our brain in the natural. But there are ways that we can actually do that rewiring in sessions using brain spotting or using internal family systems. We can actually rewrite our brain to be able to do that. And those are some of the things that are infused into the framework that we will be able to do those kind of things. So it's not just about talk therapy. It's not just about every time you are encountering a challenge that you have to make that decision. We can actually rewrite our brains by releasing some of the traumas that is going on, by connecting with our internal parts. And so that's some of the benefits of the Integrity Awakening framework. And so I want to say thank you so much for doing part two with us and then inviting y'all to stay tuned for part three because we're going even deeper. This is going to be like a this is going to be a 5-part series where we're going down and we want to be able to really dissect it a little bit more, dissect this experience because I think that there's a wealth of learning and opportunity for people to be able to say, yeah, it's possible. Because we want to be hope merchants because there is hope. Just because you were lying before doesn't mean that you're stuck lying. There is a way out. The question is whether or not you're willing to take it, whether or not you're willing to put in the work. And it is work. Okay. It's not no quick fix. It's an investment of your time, your energy, your determination. Okay. And it's like every time you fall, you pick yourself up, but you do it with accountability. You take responsibility. You have to be honest with yourself because if you're honest with yourself, you can be honest with others. But if you're willing to lie to yourself, you're not going to be able to tell anybody else the truth. It won't happen. So the integrity starts on the self level. It's on the self level. And that's what we are going to be addressing. Dwayne, I'm going to have you back in a few minutes. But for right now, we're just going to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in and stay tuned for part three. Bye bye for now.